The first problem is the ancient Egyptians were masters of proportion. The ancient Egyptian art is rightly world famous for its quality, and they didn't get things out of proportion. They wouldn't make that elementary error when they create this giant statue, carving it out of solid bedrock. But the head of the Sphinx is way too small in relation to the body. It looks like the head of a pin. It doesn't fit with that 270 foot long, 70 foot high body. It looks very much as though the Sphinx once had a much larger head.
Can you show us a photo of it, Jamie? It's also much less weathered, right?
And it's much less weathered. And this is, again, where Egyptology tries to attach the Sphinx to a particular period. Egyptology claims that's the face of Khafre, who was the successor to Khufu. It doesn't look like any known statues of Khafre that I can see, but let's not worry about that. It wears the headdress that's worn by the Sphinx, best looked at in the picture top left or the Quora picture. That headdress is called the Nemes headdress. It's the classic headdress of an Egyptian pharaoh, not, in my view, Khafre, but the headdress of an Egyptian pharaoh. But it's on a head that is way too small by comparison with the body. And both Schock and I and John Anthony West, Manu Seifzadeh, who's another excellent researcher in this field, we all feel that the Sphinx was almost certainly a complete lion at one point. It was a lion with a huge mane, and that head sticking up above the plateau got very heavily eroded, and by the time the ancient Egyptians inherited it, they decided to improve it a little bit, to cut down that heavily eroded head and put the head of a pharaoh on it.
Didn't the Greeks learn from the Egyptians as well?
Not only did they learn, but they said they learned.
Yeah, so
the Greeks were very honest about it. They sat at the feet of the ancient Egyptians. They said they learned everything they knew from the ancient Egyptians. But somehow archaeology has rewritten the narrative and gives far too much to the Greeks. Ancient Greek was a wonderful culture, magical culture, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work, but a relatively recent culture. And it was channeling knowledge from much earlier times. In a way, ancient Greece is the meeting point between the lost ancient world and the modern world in which we live. And that's why the Greeks and the Greek texts are so useful to us. And that's why I think the Atlantis story is a very important story.
Well, it's also, we do that today. If you look at the Lincoln Monument,
yeah,
and you look at the Parthenon, I mean, we mimic ancient Greek architecture today.
Absolutely, yeah. We're still copying it. And what were the ancient Greeks copying? They were copying the Egyptians.
It just completely makes sense.
Yeah, go to the Temple of Karnak, go to the Temple of Luxor. You're looking at the model for the later Greek temples. They followed that example, and they were honest about it. It's modern archaeology that has kind of rewritten the story and given way too much to the Greeks.
Does it have the same sort of sophisticated proportions where they're perfect left and right as some of the other statues do, which is another incredible mystery? That when they look at the measurements of these immense statues, somehow or another they're completely symmetrical on both left and right side.
Completely symmetrical. I'm actually not sure whether that's the case with the Sphinx. I wouldn't be surprised, because I have no doubt whatsoever that the head of the Great Sphinx was carved by the ancient Egyptians who made those statues. But the question is, what was it carved from? What was it cut down from?
Right.
So the geology, the precipitation-induced weathering, is one of the pieces of evidence for a much older Sphinx. But the other thing is the astronomy, the fact that the Sphinx is an equinoctial marker. You know, if you stand looking due east at Giza or anywhere in the northern hemisphere on the spring equinox, there's 3 key moments of the year. 4, actually. There's the winter and summer solstice, and there's the equinoxes, the spring and fall equinoxes. On the summer solstice, the sun rises far to the north of east. On the winter solstice, it rises far to the south of east. But on the equinoxes, it aligns perfectly due east. And that's what the Sphinx is. It's aligned perfectly to due east, and it's gazing at the horizon. And then we come to this contentious issue of who discovered the zodiacal constellations. Because the Sphinx, 12,500 years ago, was gazing at dawn on the spring equinox at the constellation of Leo. In other words, this lion monument on the ground was looking at its own celestial counterpart in the sky. Egyptologists dismiss that. They say that nobody had any idea of the constellations until the Greeks. I think they're wrong. So astronomy and geology together combine to invite us to consider the possibility that the Sphinx may be much older than 4,500 years old.
When you say that in Göbekli Tepe, the speculation is that they use stone tools.
Yes.
Is there any evidence of bizarre cutting like they find in Egypt, where it looks like they're using some sort of a cylindrical drill, or whether it looks like the stone is somehow scooped out in some method that we don't understand?
I've not seen evidence of a cylindrical drill at Göbekli Tepe, but what you do see, I'm going to press that red button.
There you go.
What you do see at Göbekli Tepe is pillars with carvings in relief on them.
Three-dimensional.
Three-dimensional carvings which stand out. That means that all of the stone around the carving had to be cut away. It wasn't a matter of incising the carving into the stone. You had to remove the stone around it and leave it standing proud.
Much more sophisticated.
And it's much more sophisticated, and it's on the oldest so far identified pillar in Göbekli Tepe, which maybe Jamie can call up. It's pillar 43 in enclosure D at Göbekli Tepe, which is... Any chance of getting that up? Yeah. It's a remarkable piece of ancient art. It's definitely 11,600 years old. So often, the Tepe telegrams, for example, will show it. That's on the right there, another wonderful piece of relief carving. But there, pillar 43, this vulture is in exactly the position of the constellation of Sagittarius. And the disk over its wing suggests the sun against the background of the constellation of Sagittarius. Below it, we have a scorpion, so like the constellation of Scorpio, and roughly in the right place. Above it, we have a serpent descending, a bit like Ophiuchus. It seems to speak to a knowledge of astronomy at an ancient time. Again, it's controversial, but a lot of work has been done on this. But the point is, the carving of that is highly sophisticated at 11,600 years old.
That creature, whatever it is, Jamie, that one that's sort of black and white, that image in the center says Visual Arts Cork. Yeah, click on that one. That one's amazing.
It's amazing. They cut away the whole pillar to leave that creature there, which itself is hard to identify. Is it a crocodile? We found something very similar in Peru, as a matter of fact.
Well, the proportions are off for a crocodile. It looks more like a cat.
Yeah, I think it looks more like some kind of feline, but exactly what creature it is
Something
hard.
with a tail.
Yeah, it's hard to identify.